My name's David Meiswinkle, and I'm the state coordinator for architects and engineers 10th anniversary activities in New Jersey. I'm a former police officer. Presently, I'm a criminal trial attorney, and I practice mostly in this area, Middlesex County and Somerset County. Some time ago, earlier in the year, I was introduced to a web page called ae911truth.org, and it was the best web page I've ever looked at concerning 911 evidence, and Architects and Engineers is the web page, basically. And Architects and Engineers, they deal with the forensics evidence as scientists would. So they don't look at it as a politician, they don't look at it as how they can maneuver the evidence or how they can spin it. They look at it, the evidence, for what it is. And in that regard, they're very objective, and as scientists are, and it is what it is. So it's not being spun. If there's vaporized steel, that means something to them. If there's pulverized concrete, that means something to them. If the buildings come down at a certain rate of speed, it means something to them. If they find certain elements in the soil, it means something to them. And that all is important. So by watching this, the ae911truth.org webpage, I became interested, and I signed the petition online. The petition is for a new 911 investigation, and that's what we need, is a new 911 investigation, because the original investigation is fraught with inconsistencies, with falsifications, and with fabrications, and it's totally bogus investigation by the government, by the federal government. What the architects and engineers have decided to do is to have a four-phase strategy to sort of bring awareness to the public and to push for the new 911 investigation. What that consists of is letters to law enforcement. What we've done in New Jersey, I've written letters to all the prosecutors, all the county prosecutors in New Jersey, giving them an introduction to ourselves and the information that we present in the DVD, which is a 2-hour DVD, excellent, and narrated by Richard Gage, the founder, and in the newspaper and in these cards that have a lot of interesting facts in the cards. So every prosecutor in the state of New Jersey received that. In addition, I've given them to additional, in Somerset and Middlesex County prosecutors, an additional probably 30 assistant prosecutors. I've given them the same information. The reason we want to, in the letter, we tell them we want to work with them, we want to help them, we want to have them exposed to the information that we know, so that they can address it as law enforcement. We look at law enforcement as the protectors and guardians of the society, and we want to work with them and help them. We think that law enforcement has been duped too, like most of the public has been duped, how this investigation went down. And as I mentioned previously, Tom Kane, the commission head for the 911 investigation, he said it was set up to fail. We have to remember it was the Jersey girls, widows from East Brunswick, and four women, 2 of them at least from East Brunswick, had pushed for an investigation, or else there would not have been an investigation. That is hard to believe. The most serious crime in the history of the country, and there wouldn't have been an investigation, but for these women forcing that issue. So the letters to law enforcement went out, and we invited them to come to our table today all around the state. Right now, there's a number of counties having vigils. I know Monmouth County's having one, Burlington's having one, Sussex having one, Passaig's having one, Essex County's having one, and there may be others that I'm missing right now. What we'd like to do is organize the entire state of New Jersey so that we would have 21 vigils going on at one time, in sometime in the future, to commemorate and to honor the victims and to push for a new 911 investigation. So the second prong of our approach was to set up vigils, which we're doing mostly throughout New Jersey and throughout the country on September 8th. The third area is the new DVD. It's just being released now as we speak. It's being screened, I think, in New York City this weekend. It's called 911 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. 50 prominent scientists, some of the world's most prominent, are on the DVD. They've looked at the evidence at ground zero to a man. They've concluded that the buildings were brought down by explosions, not fire. These are physicists, these are chemists, These are structural engineers. These are engineers of all different types, civil engineers also, and they're very familiar with skyscrapers. These are guys that build skyscrapers. These are demolition experts that bring buildings down. To a man or a woman, they are in agreement that the buildings came down from explosions. Now that's pretty important. In fact, it is so important because it totally contradicts what the government has said. Somebody is fabricating or lying here. That should be part of the investigation. Everything that went before, as far as the Kane Commission, has to be reevaluated. As I said, Tom Kane said it was set up to fail. Those subpoena powers, that commission was set up to fail. No subpoena powers were given to him. The importance of subpoena power is incredible. You can't hold anyone in contempt of court. You can't compel them to come and testify. You've got no power over them. They can lie, they don't have to attend you, they can take you seriously. You have to be able to make them, even the President of the United States, obey the subpoena and come and testify, so we can get at the truth, and so we can give justice to the people that passed. The fourth prong is congressional visits. The Congress is going to be in recess in late September, and when they're in recess, they'll be home in their home districts. We want to visit them. We want them to take them a copy of the new DVD, watch it with them if they would do that, give them some literature, educate them. What we're trying to do is really educate law enforcement. A lot of people don't know there was even a building number 7. In other words, they think there was 2 buildings that came down, the Twin Towers in New York City. They don't know there was a 3rd building. And as I mentioned before, it was a giant 47-story high building, 600 feet, came down, its own footprint, and it was not hit by an airplane. So the basic thing we're trying to do is make people aware of what's going on, and in particular law enforcement, and solicit their help in investigating and prosecuting the people that are responsible for this, and to do that, we need a new 911 investigation. My name is David Meiswinkle, and we're having this event to honor the victims of 911, not only in Middlesex County, where there was 57, but throughout the state of New Jersey, which had almost 700 victims. In Bergen County, there was at least 123 victims. In Monmouth County, there was at least 122 victims. In Hudson County, there was at least 111 victims. In Middlesex, 57, Morris, 54, Union, 54, Somerset, 35, Essex County, 41, Passaic, 19, and it goes down to Atlantic County with 1. 17 of the 21 counties in New Jersey had victims. Now, we would like some closure for this terrible tragedy. Unfortunately, there cannot be any closure until there's a proper investigation. The government has put forth a 911 Commission report. That report is the most bogus report since the Warren Commission report on the Kennedy assassination. It's not a feasible report. We're representing architects and engineers. The architects and engineers you can find at ae911truth.org. It is the best group in the world for uncovering the evidence at Ground Zero. They're particularly interested in what happened at Ground Zero. At Ground Zero, there were 3 buildings that collapsed. Most people don't know about the 3rd building. The 3rd building was building number 7. How big was that building? It was a giant. It was 47 stories high. Most people don't know that came down. What's significant about building number 7? It was not hit by an airplane. It was not hit by an airplane. It was not hit by an airplane. The government has explained that the buildings came down because of office fires. That is their explanation. Office fires caused 3 steel structured buildings to collapse at 911. Problem in the history of steel structured buildings. And there has been a number of examples of skyscrapers on fire for many hours
A steel-structured building in the history of steel-structured buildings has never collapsed because of fire. It's impossible. The buildings did not come down because of fire. Office fires burn at 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit approximately. In this debris was vaporized steel. Steel doesn't begin to melt at 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Impossible that fires brought it down. These buildings came down at free fall rate. What's the significance of that? That means there's nothing under them. There's no pillars. All the pillars are removed, so it goes down unimpeded. Impossible for it to happen unless the pillars are removed. The only way to remove them is to explode them away. The concrete, 90,000 tons of concrete from the World Trade Center towers was pulverized. Fires can't pulverize concrete. It was annihilated, the concrete. These buildings, the towers, were 1/4 mile high. They were giants. Some of the world's biggest buildings in the world. And yet, they came down in their own footprints, basically. And what was left of them? There was just a little pile of debris. What happened to the buildings? Where did they go? If it was a fire, which can't happen in a steel structure, but if it was a fire, there would be a pancake effect. There would be resistance. One floor would fall on another floor, would fall on another floor. It wouldn't come down straight. It would topple over some way. There would be lots of damage through all the surrounding area because the thing would be falling over, not down on its footprint. But what's maybe the most significant aspect of the analysis by the architects and engineers, they have found the explosive nanothermite in the soil. They found it, some of it unignited, some of it unignited nanothermite in the soil. This nanothermite is studied by some of the most prominent scientists in the world. One's from the University of Copenhagen, Niels Hertz, who's identified it, and it's identified as available only to military at the highest level. It only is fabricated or made in military laboratories. It's not something you'll get by on the street. So the architects and engineers stress the need for a new 911 investigation. What I've done as the state coordinator is to disseminate the information at this table, the DVD, the newspaper, and the cards, to all county prosecutors in the state of New Jersey. What we are saying is the federal authority has reneged on its responsibility to represent and protect the public. They have reneged on their responsibility to represent and protect the public and the common good. And since they've done that, and since they've done such a bad job of it, we are asking the state and the county authorities to get involved. And we're providing them with the literature, with the proof, with the evidence. We ask them to look at the accounts of the vaporized steel, the pulverized concrete, the nanothermite, the studies done by the physicists of the free fall descent. Impossible that fires were involved to bring it down. And to look at the most likely hypothesis involved. And that hypothesis is that these buildings came down because they were exploded down. They didn't come down because of fire. Now the implications here are great and grave. If you are an American, and we are, and we love our country, and we do, and we're patriots in the truest sense, and we are, then we want this examined as close as possible. And we do want the culprits brought to justice. Now, the lay person has some difficulty doing that because they're the lay person. But law enforcement, that's their job. Their job is to bring indictments after they do investigations. So we're asking the law enforcement to look at the evidence as presented by the architects and engineers. The architects and engineers will assist them. We'll work with them. We'll help catalog and line up the evidence so they can present it in the best way they think possible, whether it be at hearings or whether it be to a grand jury, and whether it be what venue they decide. But we want public exposure of the evidence. We want this to be known that prominent scientists, some of the top scientists in the world, have examined the evidence. Now, you know that the federal government, when they did their studies, they did not mention the fact in the Kane Commission report or in the National Institute of Standards and Technology that there was approximately 118 witnesses at the scene, firemen, policemen, first responders, who heard or saw explosions. That's not mentioned in the official report. How can that be? And just along with that theme, the reports do not mention building number 7, a giant in itself. Building number 7 is 47 stories high, over 600 feet tall. It would be the biggest building in 33 states. And the government's report, the Kane Commission, does not mention building number 7. How can that be? And how can we accept this as an authoritative presentation and say we have closure? We have no closure. 10 years, we have less closure than ever. It's open. There's a gaping wound in our country and in the soul of our nation. And you can see that the heart and soul of the country was ripped apart by this incident. And you can see how we were diverted into other areas of the world, in particular Iraq and Afghanistan, because of weapons of mass destruction which never existed. There are so many questions to look at, to ask regarding this issue. Now, the architects and engineers, they don't speculate on who's behind it. You'll have to talk to other groups about that. What they do, though, is provide an evaluation analysis of the evidence, which is so important to maintain their credibility. They stick to the evidence, and the evidence tells them that these buildings came down from explosions. Diametrically opposed evaluation of the government. You know that the government never went to the sites. My understanding, the government did not check the soils or they would have found explosions. The government was asked if they looked for explosions. They said no, even though every component of explosion was available, and they were said, why not? And they said, we weren't asked to. What were they asked to do? To prove a fire? Did it? And they simulated it in the computers? That appears to be what they did. They tried to make everything fit. Architects and engineers members have looked at the reports of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, have concluded the reports are fabricated, they're fiction, they're false. We want this information. Bring them to the table with the architects and engineers. Let them sort through the evidence. Have these hearings done publicly so that people can see them on television. This is a big issue. 3,000 people murdered. There has never been a crime like this in the history of the United States. And there has never been a worse investigation in the history of the United States. What's going on here? Where is the problem? Let's have a hearing and address it. Let's look at the evidence. Let's find out where the problem is. Let's get our country back on track. We all know it's off track. We all sense it's off track. We know the economy is sinking. We know we're in wars. We don't know why we're in. We know we're $14 trillion in debt, where every person, even a new baby just born, their debt is like $46,000 around their head. What's going on? It almost looks like someone is intentionally trying to drive our country into the ground. Could that be what's happening? Architects and engineers not going to speculate on that, whether that's what's happening. Could it be that the nation state is under attack, not only in the United States, but throughout the world? Architects and engineers are not going to speculate on that fact. But what they're going to say, they're not dealing with speculation. They're dealing with facts. You look at the facts, you go with the facts. The facts tell you the buildings came down through explosions. This is an important fact. If they came down from explosions, it means the commission before it was totally wrong. What did the commission say about that? What did Tom Kane say about that? He said, our commission was set up to fail. He said it. His co-chairman said it. John Farmer, the attorney, representing them, was so disgusted with it. And Max Cleland, one of the commissioners, he resigned because they weren't allowed to look at the evidence. Tom Kane said we were underfunded, we were rushed, and get this, they had no subpoena powers. They were having a hearing, they couldn't compel anyone to testify. And if they testified, they couldn't compel them to testify truthfully. And if they lied, they couldn't put them in jail where they belong. They couldn't do that. How can you have a hearing at the most important event or tragic event in our life and not do what you're supposed to do, what you should do, is investigate it properly? So today we honor the 57 victims from Middlesex County. We honor the 700 approximately from New Jersey. And we honor the approximately 3,000 victims in this country. And we will not allow their deaths to go unaddressed. We take it to the local level now, to the county prosecutors and to the state, to look at the evidence, since the federal authorities, as I've said prior, have shirked their responsibilities to look at what is directly in their face.
The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
That should be it.
Thanks very much. Completely collapsed.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's
Yeah, well, fuck, what do we do? We made it outside, we made it about a block.
We made it at least two blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was like, it was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
As if they were
detonated,
planned
yeah.
to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running.
Just ran up West
And then you just sort of, this cloud of shit chasing you down.
Couldn't
Just
outrun
ran
it.
up West Street.
I could outrun it.
So what'd you do?
I jumped behind a battalion car, I hit under the car, I was just waiting to die.
Building, you see in plain sight.
When the first one, when it hit the bulb, he was in the basement in their electrical shop, which was 6 floors below.
What did he tell you about it?
He didn't tell me everything. He told that he can, that it is too much, even today. But he told that he basically had to be on the roof by 9 o'clock, and he was a couple of minutes late that day. So he was sitting in the shop when it just was crazy noise, and no one understood what to expect, what is going on. They kind of understood because they went through it in first time. In 1993, he was there.
Did he hear any explosions?
Yes.
He heard explosions.
He heard it, but he didn't see it first because he was in the basement.
Okay, he was in the basement and he heard explosions.
Yes.
Okay, and what did he do?
He went to the first floor. He didn't go anywhere above, and he saw that it was terrible. What he told me is that it was a lot of bodies.
This was on the first floor. There was a lot of
on
bodies.
the first floor, in the main area, like main lobby of the building.
Okay. And this,
He went 6 floors to the top. He was in the basement.
This was in the North Tower, first building.
Yes.
Okay. So he's in the North Tower. Here's explosions. He's in the basement. How many basement levels was he down?
6.
He was in the 6th one down.
Yes.
He comes up to the lobby and he finds the lobby's been blown up. He's
Basically, yes. No, it was like some kind of explosion. Of course, explosion was very high. So it was fire. It was a lot of bodies everywhere. People who were seriously burned and were walking around without understanding what is going on.
And these bodies were on the first floor.
Yes.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
It's terrible. And after this, what he did, since he was there before, first time, he just got lucky, unbelievably lucky, because first time he was on the roof. He was working on a window washer, and when it hit in the basement in 1993, he was on 110th floor. So the building just basically was going like up and down for a second, and after this he was left for 24 hours with all the electricians to fix it.
That's the first time.
First time, but that time he was not able to call us for about 4 hours.
Now, does your husband like to talk? He doesn't like to talk about this.
No, he will not be.
Why is that?
He barely. He went through too much. He told that what he saw there is impossible to tell. He becomes over emotional about it. He starts to cry when he is asked. He definitely will not be able to do it.
Okay,
I can bear it.
He's been totally traumatized, even 10 years later.
Of course.
Yes, yeah.
It stays forever.
Sure, I understand.
But what he did this time, he went across the street to the financial center to call us.
Okay.
Because he already understood that he didn't want what happened first time, when we didn't know he's alive or he's dead.
Now, when he got up to the first floor, what did he do? Did he just get out of the building?
He got out of the building. He had radios for all of them to talk to each other. So their supervisor told them to go outside and wait somewhere in a safer area, to go back as soon as possible to help to fix everything.
Now, the building,
no one expected that it will be
The building
done.
was still standing at that
Of
time?
course.
Okay.
Of course.
So after he left the building, how much time until it collapsed? You know?
No, I don't.
You don't know how many minutes? Well, he came up to the
no,
floor.
he went outside. He
Yeah.
went across the street, called us. And when he left a message, because no one was at home, the second building just was hit.
Oh, the second
So
building.
this is exactly the time we heard it on
Okay.
his message.
So
that he was like, oh my God, oh my God.
So both buildings were still standing?
Yes.
And you heard it on a message he was saying that?
He was saying the second building was hit.
You still have that message? You erased it, Okay.
And then he called me at work. I was in the town Manhattan, where we were just watching TV, and it was told that probably it is some kind of mistake of people who controlling the planes. And I told him that this is the idea at that time on the TV, and he told no way it is possible. It was definitely an attack, and just get out of the town if you can. Or if possible, after this, to be together and go to help.
And the buildings are still up now?
They're still up.
They're still up?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what he did after this, when the building started to fall down, he went through the subway, which still amazes me that he really was didn't think about anything, because that was probably one of the scariest places to go. And he had the flashlight, because he had his uniform, his tools with him, everything. He was at work. So with his flashlight, he was going with a group of people who were just strangers, who went there, and basically they were out, maybe because of his flashlight, they saw where to go. And he was out of that area on the first ferry through downtown Manhattan to New Jersey.
Well, thank you very much. That's an amazing story.
It is scary.
It's very, very scary.
All his co-workers alive. And they meet now each year, and it's it's interesting. They're very close.
These are Middlesex County 9/11 victims. Sakara Philamuri, John Adam Larson.